Yes, let's do this. Welcome, one and all, to Build. Now, I'm going to ask you how you're feeling in just a second, but I know what you're thinking. It's weird to respond and applaud to a recorded man asking for a response. But don't worry, we've thought of everything here. That's why I've enlisted the incredible crew surrounding you at this very moment in this very room. So I am going to ask how you're feeling and how things are going. But when you respond, it's not for me. It's to let them know. So right now, welcome to Build. How are we all doing? You doing okay? Is everybody doing all right? You feeling good? You having a good day? Has it been a good day? I need to know. It has? Because they're going to tell me if it hasn't. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Well, that's great news. I'm happy to hear that, and I'm happy you're here. We have got an amazing lineup. Incredible guests coming out here in just a few short moments. So many incredible guests, and a wonderful moderator joining them to boot. Now, if you haven't been to Build before, I'm going to walk you through everything, all right? Don't worry about it. Totally painless process and procedure here. Everybody's going to come on out in a second. They're going to sit in all these chairs, pick up all these mics, drink from all these mugs, okay? And they're going to have a conversation. And once that's done, it's your turn to ask some questions. Get the wheel spinning from now. That's right, audience Q&A. Wouldn't be Build without it. So think of some great questions. You don't have to raise your hand. You don't have to do anything crazy like that. Just have the question ready. You'll see people walking around with mics. They're looking for you. All right, so they'll find you. They'll get you a mic. You'll ask your question. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be a lot of fun. Now, for those tuning in live, you probably have some questions as well. You always do, right? So go ahead and tweet them at us at Build Series NYC. Very easy, very simple process. I know you can do it. If you don't have Twitter, we're not judging you. That's fine. You can still ask a question. Just press the button that says submit a question. I think it's over there. If you're watching in the app, it's probably below the video. That's neither here nor there. Just think of your question, send it on over. And if it's a great one, well, we'll ask it live, and you get to be a part of this here show. Now, we're going to run a video real quick, and then we will get everybody out here, and we will do this thing. But before that, I will remind you that not only can our guests hear you, but, again, incredible crew surrounding you at this very moment, looking at your response as I ask you the following question. Are you guys ready to do this thing? Come on, make some noise. Let's do it upright. They came all this way. They're here for you. Come on. There you go. That's how it's done. All right. Enough of that. I think it's that time, isn't it? Yep. All right. I'm getting word right now. It is, in fact, that time to go ahead and roll that clip.
Claire, it's a baby girl.
Oh, you're so beautiful.
We're gonna be all right. I promise. Mom and Daddy, give me a kiss.
The bargain was that we raise this child together, and you will not let me in.
You asked me to leave behind everything that truly mattered to me. Oh, that's wonderful, darling.
Wish away. You couldn't look at Brianna without saying him.
What is it that you want from me?
I want to know when you're going to come back from the past.
I've come home. You are under arrest. Jenny, no! Put him in the irons!
I spoke to you of my wife. You said she was dead. I said she was gone. She's truly gone.
We have to establish that Jamie's alive. There must be records.
We will find him.
"20 years ago, I shut the door on the past. And it was the hardest thing I've ever done. I can't go through that again." I found him. I want to come back.
Please welcome to the stage your moderator, Ethan Alter, and today's guests, Caitriona Balfe and Sam Heughan.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. Guys, Outlander is over. It's over.
Come on!
The show is back. This Sunday, 8 p.m. on Stars and the Stars app. This is super exciting for all of us. You can see the enthusiasm right now. How do you, for you, Outlander's been over for a while. You've been making it. So is it the same level of excitement when you get that first script that
It's
you're feeling
monumental.
right now?
It's monumental. The rain has come to New York.
Yes, we brought it with us. We're trying to create Scotland right here in Manhattan.
I just imagine you standing outside Ron Moore's window as he's typing away. And you're just like, do you have scripts ready yet, Ron? Can you show us, Ron, what's next?
Ron, where are you? Where are the scripts?
Ron wrote the first script and for the season, and it's a terrific start to the season, and the whole season is really strong, I think. But it's an amazing episode.
Right. Coming back, the one thing that was different this time is you weren't together in the first episode, and you're not together for a little while.
Maybe that's why it's the best.
Ow, that hurts just a little bit.
But what was that like as performers, not having your other half there to start the season?
Well, what we haven't told you is that in all of those clips, that's actually Sam playing Frank.
It's
He's just so good.
want to know where you've been.
No, I mean, for me, it was slightly different because I was working with my regular homies. You know, I was working with Tobias and Sophie. So I didn't miss him at all. I don't know. What were you doing? No, I'm...
It was, no, the first episode, you know, we do say goodbye to a lot of our regular characters, and it's very, you know, it's the beginning. It's a new beginning for the show. We obviously end up in Jamaica, which we were shooting in South Africa, and there's a lot of new faces and a new look to the show. But yeah, the first few episodes are very sad, and there's it was hard to say goodbye to a lot of our favorite people.
Right. You were joking about it before, but I mean, how closely were you sort of following the idea of Jamie and Claire being separated? I mean, did you stay away from Sam on set? Did you make a point of like doing the wedding day thing of not seeing your husband?
Well, we were working in very different worlds. I mean, you know, I was sort of doing the 40s, 50s, 60s. I was a lot of my stuff was studio based or Glasgow city based, which is Boston, of course. And Sam's stuff, they were out in fields that were, where was it? Like Took, I think. It was really wet and mucky. So we didn't see a lot of each other. I mean, we did shoot a little bit out of sequence, so it wasn't like we were separated completely and then we started with the reunion. But it did feel like, you know, there would be a couple of times we'd run into each other and we're like, oh my God, like, what have you been doing? Like, how are you? So it was really nice when we finally got to get into the proper gritty stuff, meaty, steamy stuff.
What did you discover about yourselves as characters and performers, maybe being separated, having to sort of build your own life in this way as your character? Were there different aspects of your performance you hadn't considered before?
I mean, I think both of us definitely feel our characters are very different in the beginning of the season. Claire, for sure, you know, she's somebody who's lost a part of herself. I mean, she's had to put a huge part of herself to one side, and you know, she's someone who's very sexually liberated and very passionate, and that part of her is gone for the best part of 20 years, and that has to have an effect on how you carry yourself, how you interact with people. I mean, she's also a professional doctor, so there's an authority to her, and I also think a slight rigidness to her in the beginning of the season. But I'm pretty sure that when she reunites with Jamie, that those layers kind of fall away and she becomes that free and loose woman that she always has been.
Yeah, she can't hold herself back. No. But it's well, I mean, there is an energy and a life to the two of them when they're together, and I think so when they're apart. Yeah, I mean, certainly for Jamie's story, you know, he's learning to live without the woman he loves, and he finds that very difficult, and he's a shadow of himself, and it's a long journey for him to get back to the man that we know and love, and it's probably not until she returns that's the case.
Right, becomes a whole again, in a way. Certainly something, being able to work in
That's
the
Ron Moore.
Ron,
Ron, we're not giving away any secrets, I promise.
Sacked.
Calling in. One thing I wonder, I mean, at this point, 3 seasons in, these characters are yours on the show. They exist on the page as well, the great characters that Diana created, but you have a certain ownership of them after 3 seasons. How do you think your versions of them differ from what's on the page? Do you notice a difference between the characters in the book and who you're playing on screen?
Well, that's interesting because I think when you read a book, you always, I always think of it like we all play our own little movie in our head. So my reading of Claire is through the filter that I interpret her on the scripts as well. Right. So, I think maybe I've tried to make Claire a little bit more earthy or relatable. I think sometimes when you read a book, there's certain things that translate so well on paper that when you try and put it into action, it can be a little more. I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know. I get the page and I do what I try and do.
No, we were asked this question last night, and it's like, when you read the book, do you hear each other's voices or whatever? And it is a tough one because ultimately the book is different to the script, even though we try and stick as close as possible. Right. And when you read the script, it's slightly different. Right. We have different writers on the show, and so ultimately, we try and bring that sort of.
It's funneled through many layers of interpretation, I guess. Yeah, and by the time it gets to us, there's a way that I will see things purely because my life experience informs the way I understand something. So, I think it'll always be a different interpretation.
Right. One thing that's really interesting about this season is the show's always been about a woman out of time. And in the beginning of this season, she returns to her time, but it's not the same anymore. It's changed. And certainly something that she wrestles with throughout the first few episodes is the sexism that she encounters, which is much more insidious than she experienced in the 18th century. What was that sort of like bringing that out and depicting Claire's experiences coming back to her present day?
Well, I'm not sure that it's more insidious in the 20th century, but I do think that because Claire in the 18th century is an outsider, because she's sort of outside the traditional societal, format or whatever of the Scottish clan system, she's immune to certain rules and regulations that other women of that time are subjected to. So when she's back in her own time, she has to sort of fall into step with what everybody else is doing. And she doesn't have the protection of being that other. And so that's why I think you can really notice it. And I think it's such a jarring thing because when we first meet her in season 1, it's, wartime. She's on the front lines with the men as a nurse. Women at that point were out and they were in the workforce. They were working in the factories. They were part of the war effort. And in the 50s, there was a real retraction. It was kind of like, okay, thank you for all of your work and all your help, but you can go back to the kitchen and put on that really full skirt and the little blouse and put your hair in a ponytail and we'll all be really happy. And I think that was really difficult for women. And I think that it's really nice that you see that play out. But I love, I think it's in some of the clips, and I hope I'm not spoiling anything, but there's a scene where Frank's boss really tries to put her in her place. Right. And I love because it's like, that's the moment she decided to go to medical school. Mm-hmm. And it's for her, it's fuel. When somebody tries to do that and stop her and kind of belittle her, she takes that and she turns it into ammunition to kind of be like, right, I'm going to go do something really special.
Yeah. It's funny because there's actually more freedom for her in the 1700s.
Right. Yeah, we should say it wasn't an easy time for women in the 1700s in Scotland.
No.
But in some ways, she did have that is more freedoms in some ways.
Yeah,
back in the past. The other thing, certainly in the present day, we see her being very assertive about her body and sex. And I feel like we should dim the lights and put on the Barry White at this point as we move into the sex discussion. But she is very assertive in the present day, and it surprises some of the people she's with, and also for Sam, some of the women in the past that Jamie encounters are also very sort of what they want from him. So in terms of that aspect, it feels like it shouldn't be revolutionary in the modern day to have a show about a woman who.
I know, it seems like everyone's really surprised that women like sex. I don't know, how have children been created for eons if women hated sex so much? I don't know. Should we do a poll? Do women hate sex that much?
Raise your hands now. One of the things that's been added this season is more female directors to the show. Do you notice a difference in the way they choreograph the sex, or just any scene in general, things that they pick up on that make it slightly different?
No, you know what?
No.
Happily, it's so individual.
Right.
And I think that's something that there should be more female directors purely because it should represent the population distribution,
Right.
you know. But no, there's some women are very sensitive and come from a much sort of more romantic viewpoint, but then some of our male directors have been more like that. Some of our female directors are much more technical and you know, it just runs the gambit, and that's how it should be. You know, it's not, oh, you're women, you're going to look at it exactly this way. No, there's very many different opinions and different aspects to it
It's
all.
about the right person for the job, and I think we've got the right people for the job, and you know, it is fun to work with different directors. But the first few, actually, we have Brendan, you know, who was it was kind of nice to start with him, and but then we had a real sort of mixed group of directors, and I feel like each one brings something different to the show. Right.
And it's amazing, you know, I would say one of our greatest action directors was Anna Forrester.
Right.
Who also was able to handle really sensitive material very beautifully. But one of our most sensitive, I think, romantic directors was Metin. So it,
wonderful.
you know, I think I love that Meryl Davis really fought hard to try and get as many female directors as possible. But also, I love that it doesn't become a cliche that it's like, oh, the women are good at this thing and the men are good at this. No, it's great to see that there's such variety among everybody.
I think the show has this strength, you know, and sensitivity, and I think that's really important. You know, it's not a show for women. It's for everyone. It's got so much more to it.
We need more men. Come on. There's some here today, though, which I'm very excited about. Hi.
There's a couple guys in the audience.
Hey.
I will say for audience of both sexes, Sam, your butt gets a pretty good workout in a lot of the episodes this season. So
My butt's getting a complex, by the way.
Your butt does well too. I mean, yeah, there's a bit of butt.
The other thing that was picked up last season, we saw that beautiful episode where Claire lost Faith, her child, with Jamie. And in that moment, it was told from her perspective because it was her loss. And then we raced to the end of the season with all the other events. I think this season we really see how that loss impacted Jamie and the loss of Brianna as well. Sam, what can you talk about in terms of fatherhood for Jamie this season, and how he sort of thinks about it, and what being a parent in his head after suffering these losses?
Yeah, I think that's. Trying to talk around spoilers here, but he obviously it greatly affected him, and you know, a father can never quite experience it the same way that a mother can, or that Claire does. But he does greatly regret that, and then to lose Brianna is a tragedy for him. So he's lost his whole life, and to rebuild that takes some time, and then. Without giving away too much, he maybe finds something else to put his life into. But again, it's never runs smoothly for him. It's something that he's always wanted, and I think it's something that he yearns for, and it's a part of him that's incomplete.
Right. Neither of you have children yourselves, but were there parts you drew on growing up, your memories of being a child, that you wanted to bring into your portrayal of parenthood, or thoughts about being a mother and father?
Yeah, I mean, I think you steal from every moment in your life you can, or, you know, I come from a very big family. Pretty much all my siblings have kids at this point, so I'm an aunt to 11, 12 kids. So yeah, I think you just try and draw on all of those experiences that you have or that you've witnessed.
Yeah, I mean, in Jamie's case, it's a very lonely season for him for a while, and I think it's about companionship and about him wanting to nurture something. And I think, it's very sad that he doesn't get to do that.
I do want to talk about your co-star Tobias Menzies, who is
It's me.
Oh,
yes, right here. You can put on your other face now.
Thank you.
What's funny about this season is he gets to be Frank more often than he has in the past, and you encounter him as Frank more often than he has in the past. Is it funny seeing him in that other persona after being with Black Jack for so long?
I love working with Tobias in the Claire and Frank dynamic. You know, I think it's a really sad, I mean, it's so tragic, those two, because, you know, especially Tobias plays Frank with such heart, and there's such a gentleness to him, and, you know, he's such a good guy in a way. I know in the books he's not as good of a guy, and later on he's not a great guy, but you know, he takes back this woman who's been away for 3 years, comes back pregnant with another man's child, and she says she's been in the past, and he's like, okay, I'll take you back. You know, and he really does, he does try very hard to give her space to understand, but she's experienced something far deeper and far greater than she ever felt for Frank. And so you can never really go back after you've felt something like that. And so the tragedy is that Claire isn't getting what she wants. Frank isn't getting what he wants. And the two of them are good people trying to make the best out of a really messed up situation. And it's just really tragic to see them live in this compromised, sort of unhappy life. You know, they do spend 20 years together. So there has to be, I think Tobias and I really wanted to not make this like, she doesn't love him, he doesn't love her, you know, they're miserable. I don't think two people would spend 20 years together if that was the case. I don't think Claire would spend 20 years with someone if that was the case. So, you know, I love that it's not just all Frank chasing Claire.
Right.
You know, she's essentially a widow in terms of the Claire-Jamie relationship. So she has to try and want to succeed. She has to try and want happiness. Right. I think otherwise she would be kind of a pathetic character in some ways. And she's a survivor, and I think she would try and succeed in every part of her life, whether it's a relationship or career or motherhood. But the tragedy is that she never is able to replicate or match what she once felt. So, but he's wonderful in this role, and it was great to work with him so much.
He really, without giving away any other sort of spoilers, but he kind of, there's a moment, and you have to watch out for it, but he really beautifully ties, actually, I think the two characters, Blackjack and Frank, there's just a moment that he ties the two together.
I'm going to ask you about that moment later.
Well, we shall talk about it.
If you see it in the episodes, tweet at us, and we'll figure it out. Tweet at Sam, and he'll tell you if you're right or not. Which scene was it? So, Sam, I don't know if people know this, but we have a superhero in our midst. Kind of, Sam played Batman, The Dark Knight, in a Batman Live stage show. I don't know if you had seen this before, but I want to confirm. They made a tartan Lego Batman. And I want to confirm or deny if this is modeled after you.
No, that's me.
Is that you? Okay.
Yeah.
Let's put it up and take a look.
It's actually to scale as well.
We should take the helmet off and see,
that is
because
epic.
I really wanted to know. I should say the lightsaber doesn't come with it. That was my daughter's edition, because obviously you need a lightsaber
Why
when
is
you're
he backwards? He's always looking over his shoulders. Isn't it? He's amazing. Yeah, that's exactly how I played it. Actually.
Right. Is that what you really did? Is that your...
Yes. I tried to put elements of Batman in Jamie Fraser as much as possible.
More than you'd know. Sometimes he's like...
It's a spoiler, but I do wear a mask in most of the season.
How does one audition for Batman? I really want to. Did you do Shakespeare and the accent? Shall I compare thee to a summer's air? I mean, what were you doing?
How did that go down?
Well, how did it go down? Yes, it was a very odd experience, but it was a lot of fun. Yeah, it was. It feels like
No. How did the audition go down?
Yeah, that's like thank you.
Don't
I got some backup here. We're gonna make this happen.
It was like a stage play, you know. So it was actual scenes. It was like doing a bit of theater, and so there were scenes as Batman, and there were scenes as Bruce Wayne, and. I would love to play him again. Maybe on screen.
Didn't Ben Affleck pull out of the film?
That's right.
He did.
Yep.
I come with
Zack
my own
Snyder,
Lego
or
Batman.
whoever is directing. May we present
Zach.
Sam Heughan.
Scottish Batman.
It's there. We have it in Lego proof, so I think it works. And Caitriona, I mean, they're looking for a Joker now. I think let's think big and do Caitriona Balfe as
Hey,
Joker.
I'm going to
Come
put my
on.
hat in the ring.
Absolutely, yeah.
Jack Nicholson. Who else played him?
Heath
Ledger, Caitriona Balfe. I mean, it's a natural progression of order.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Who cares about canon? We'll just throw it out.
God,
Hey.
why so serious?
Why so serious? As people know me, a very serious person.
Oh, God.
What was sort of your favorite, what memory from shooting season 3 sort of encapsulate the experience for you? I'm sure there are lots, but is there one in particular that sort of solidifies in your mind?
Oh, God. There's so many. What?
I think, I mean, being on a tall ship boat that
Yes.
has wheels in the middle of a desert that's on a gimbal, so it goes backwards and forwards, and you're looking out over the African desert, and there's a motorway going past, and it just, but so transportive, and you feel like you're on this great ship. That was
We did. I think possibly I don't know if it was your favorite day. It was one of my favorite days, but we are on the ship, and there's something that happens. So there's a lot of water.
Right.
But so they had rain machines and, cannons of water, and there was just so much water that you can't even really keep your eyes open or your mouth open or breathe without just being like, bah, ah. But before each shot, we would have to wet ourselves down because it's so hot that you would just sort of dry out in between. So you and I would just dance in the rain.
In the rain.
It was great fun. It was like...
And a lot of the acting was that, wasn't it?
Yeah. When you see it, you'll be like, oh.
You'll know the point.
Yeah.
But there's so much. I mean, yeah, it's an incredible season just to go from Scotland and in Boston and then to be on these boats and then in Jamaica as well. It's just, it expands a great distance.
Awesome. Well, let's turn it over to the Sassenachs in the audience. The only thing you can have to ask about Lego or Batman. But
Hey, that's not a
Great.
Sassenach. That's a... What's the male version of
I always wanted
Sassenach?
to know that.
Well, it's the same thing, but maybe we could make up a name for them.
I think you have to, since it's your tagline.
I'm a huge fan of the show. I think it's absolutely amazing. And there are so many dramatic scenes in the show, like really intense scenes. I was wondering, in the first 2 seasons, for each of you, which scene was the most intense, maybe emotionally, to film?
I mean, probably Faith, but I think also the last scene at the Stones, I think that's probably another massive one.
Yeah, that was good. I mean, obviously the end of season 1 was huge. It was a very intense, weird kind of period, but it was, amazing to be given a chance to go to these dark places. But this season, maybe isn't as dark, but it certainly gave us a lot of acting challenges, and that's what the great joy of this show. I think that we do get given these wonderful pieces of theatre or drama.
Excellent. Nick?
Hi guys, I'm a big fan of the show and the books. I was just gonna ask you, going to South Africa and being on the Black Sails film set and everything, what was your favorite memory of either a day or, as you guys just said, the day, but just favorite overall memory or experience that you had?
There was a lot of pirate acting going on from both of us.
Well, there's a thing where, so they have a gimbal, which is, makes the set kind of tilt from side to side. But our sound man, it's commonly said on set that he would hear a mouse pass wind on Mars. He has very sensitive ears. So they would have to turn it off to get very clear sound.
Recording, yeah.
So sometimes you'd have to pretend we're still gimbaling. So there was a bit of Star Trek
There's a lot of
acting
Star
went
Trek
on.
acting going on.
Especially in the beginning before we kind of got it down. And I remember the first day I had to do it. And I was like, really, guys? Like, what? I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And I did the first take, and I could just hear all this sniggering from Video Village. And I was like, okay, maybe I'm going to take it back by about 25 to 75%.
A lot of the boats' interiors are incredible, and they're also on the sound stage there, and they're very small, cramped, confined area. And I mean, people were bumping their heads like all day. So you're just sitting there, and they're setting up for a shot, and you just hear some. And it just, there was a lot of expletives every day. And our poor director, he kept bashing his head, and then he eventually ended up just laughing every time he was.
I think he ended up with quite
brain
a
damage.
padded hat towards the end.
It's tough. But we had a wonderful time there.
Hi. So as a nurse myself, one of my favorite things about Claire is that she is a nurse. Did you do anything, any research or talk to anyone from her becoming a nurse in the 40s to a surgeon in the 60s?
Yeah, well, in the 40s, we've had this great doctor who comes on set, who's our medical advisor, and her name is Claire, funnily enough, but she's fantastic. So in the very beginning in season 1, we'd gotten these missives, I guess, from the British Army that were basically instructions on all the different bandaging styles and things that you had to do on the field. And so that was something that I went over and learned how to do different bandaging things. And I get very protective of the way Claire bandages, because Sam has a lot of bandages always. And so it's supposed to be Claire doing it, but sometimes it's Sam's costume girls. And I'm always like, She wouldn't
Nope.
do it like that.
Wrong. Take it off.
Wrong.
I'll do it.
I'll do it. Move aside. And so there's a little bit of control issues going on. But going into the 60s, I mean, we have one scene that was so cool to film. Actually, I keep forgetting. There's so much stuff that you just forget about, but it's a proper operation, and we had like moving parts and prosthetics, and we had to learn how to tie knots off with one hand, and we had an Irish nurse in who was a surgical nurse who was very. we kind of walked into the set, and the props guys had laid everything out. She's like, no. It's not how it would be. This is where this goes. This is where this goes. You take it in that hand. I was like, oh God, okay. She was very, very, very strict. But I love all of that. There's only a certain amount of you can learn, but I always like to try and do as much research as I can. But we always have these great medical advisors on set. So.
We had one in South Africa, and I mean, there's so much detail that goes in, and we were talking about what bile or puke looks like when you're throwing up. And I mean, we were actually looking at different ones that they'd made, different consistency, and he was like, no, you need something with a bit more bile in it. So they worked out, and eventually it was like egg whites they put in with this other stuff, but it's just like so much. You're like, I don't care, just give me something. I'm just going to throw it out anyway.
Nobody's going to see.
No, we need egg whites. We need egg whites and vanilla essence.
Career goals, bandit critique, and bandage pad critique. Yeah. Let's see. Who else we got? Right over there.
Hi, I'm a really big fan of the show. I'd like to know, what is the best part of your working day?
Oh, walking on set. It never gets old. I think there's something really magical about film sets, especially when you walk through studios or walk through lots. And there's carpenters hammering away. There's people moving things. It's like a little city of. It always reminds me of Fraggle Rock. I don't know if people know that. Like, there's just so much stuff going on, and I think if you've dreamed of being an actor since you were a kid, that little butterfly in your stomach of when you're walking through and there's so much activity, and you're like, I get to do this for a living. I think that's always the highlight, and then it steadily goes downhill all day.
That's true. After like the 12th take.
You're like, hi, good morning, everybody. I hate you all.
We're still doing this scene. No, but there's always, especially, we said in 1 and 2, the seasons, in Scotland, there's always a moment where you're just looking out on location and you're just like, wow. And I think on this season especially, I mean, there was one day we were shooting on a beach in South Africa, and there were dolphins in the water next to us, maybe a few hundred feet away, and they were like trying to attract our attention the whole day. And literally, I was shooting a scene, and I'd just be like, like side-eyeing them the whole time because they were like waving their tails, and it was so fun.
They wanted a cameo. Come on. They're like, get us into the show, too. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, guys. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you for coming in today. Watch
Thank
Outlander.
you so much.
Having us. Thank you for coming.
Sunday, September 10th, 8 p.m. on Stars and the Stars app. Drink them up. All the season. Drink it up. Outlander's over. Thanks, everyone.